The sun was blazing over Manila's bustling marketplace. Jeepneys honked endlessly, vendors shouted prices for fresh fruits, and the aroma of roasted corn filled the air. People hurried about, each lost in their daily struggles. Amid all the noise and chaos, a man walked quietly, almost unnoticed. It was Manny Pacquiao. But this was not the Manny people were used to seeing under bright lights, inside a roaring arena, or behind microphones at press conferences. Today he wore a plain shirt, an old cap pulled low on his head, and simple slippers. No cameras followed him, no bodyguards cleared the way. He was just another man walking among the crowd, simple, humble, and almost invisible. As he moved along the street, Manny glanced around, absorbing the familiar sights of his country. The faces reminded him of where he came from: poverty, struggle, survival. And then, something made him stop. On the corner of the road, just outside a small Sari store, a man sat slumped on the pavement. His clothes were torn, his hands outstretched. His head hung low as people walked past him without care. Some spared a coin, some looked away with disgust. Others whispered harsh words. Why don't people like him just get a job? Always begging, so pitiful. The man remained silent, taking every word, every insult. His hand trembled as he held out an old plastic cup, waiting for kindness that rarely came. Manny slowed down, his eyes narrowing. Something about that man, the shape of his face, the curve of his jawline, the faint scars near his eyebrow. It felt familiar. Manny stepped closer, squinting as memories stirred. The beggar lifted his head. For a brief second, their eyes locked, and in that instant, Manny's heart froze. It wasn't just a stranger. It wasn't just another poor soul forgotten by the world. This was someone he knew, a face from his past, a face from his childhood. Cliffhanger for audience. Manny couldn't believe it. After decades, here he was, face to face with his childhood companion, now begging for survival. But what he did next shocked everyone in that marketplace. Have you ever bumped into an old friend after many years? What was that moment like? Tell us in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story might just inspire you even more. The marketplace carried on as usual, unaware of the silent storm building in one corner. Manny stood still, his cap pulled low, watching his old school friend beg for spare change. His chest tightened as he recognized the man who once shared chalk, notebooks, and childhood dreams with him. But the crowd didn't see a childhood friend. They only saw a beggar. A woman passed by, wrinkling her nose in disgust. "Why don't you find work instead of sitting here all day?" she muttered, loud enough for others to hear. A group of teenagers walked past, giggling. One of them tossed a coin at the man, not into his cup, but onto the ground. "Pick it up, Kuya," they jeered, before running off, laughing as though mocking someone's suffering was entertainment. The man's trembling hand reached for the coin, slowly, painfully. His back bent as the crowd watched, some shaking their heads, others pulling out their phones to record a cheap moment of cruelty. Nearby vendor added his voice. "Hey, move away from my shop. Customers don't want to see someone like you here. Go beg somewhere else." His words carried no compassion, only irritation. The beggar lowered his head further, his shoulders curling inward as though he wanted to disappear. He whispered a quiet, "Sorry," and shifted a little to the side, clutching his old plastic cup tighter. Through all of this, Manny remained silent. He didn't rush forward, he didn't shout. He simply observed, calm, still, yet his eyes revealed a storm of emotion. Whispers began to circle around. Some people shook their heads and said, "Such a waste of a man's life." Others speculated. Maybe he was a drunk, maybe a gambler. Assumptions, judgments, none of them true, but all of them spoken loudly enough for the man to hear. The beggar's face showed no anger, only a tired smile, a smile of someone who had long accepted the cruelty of society. He reached out his hand again, silently begging for mercy in a world that only gave him shame. Manny's fists clenched slightly in his pockets. He remembered the boy who once sat 2 desks behind him in class, who used to joke about one day becoming a policeman or a teacher. That boy was now sitting on the ground, invisible to the world. And yet, Manny did not reveal himself. Not yet. The people around had no idea who the quiet man in the cap was. To them, he was just another passerby. But in reality, this passerby was a world champion, a national hero, a man who knew hunger and hardship far too well. The market grew louder. More voices, more mockery, more judgment. The beggar sat silently through it all, his dignity chipped away by every insult. Manny took a step closer, his shadow now falling over his old friend. Still, he said nothing. He simply watched, observed, listened. The crowd still murmured, some mocking, some whispering, some ignoring completely. But Manny finally stepped forward. His simple slippers scraped against the rough concrete as he slowly lowered himself down, crouching in front of the man everyone else only saw as a beggar. "Kuya," Manny said softly. His voice was calm, gentle, carrying a tone of familiarity that the others didn't understand. The beggar looked up. His tired eyes struggled to focus, but as he studied the face before him, his expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. His lips trembled as he whispered, Manny Pacquiao?" The crowd stirred. A few turned their heads. Had they heard correctly? Pacquiao? The name felt out of place here in this noisy marketplace, but Manny didn't react to the whispers. He kept his eyes locked on the man before him. The beggar blinked several times, rubbing his eyes as though he couldn't trust his own vision. "It's you, isn't it? My old classmate from General Santos? I used to sit 2 desks behind you." Manny's lips curved into the faintest smile. Memories flooded back. Dusty classrooms, barefoot walks to school, shared snacks. During recess, laughter under the shade of mango trees. He nodded slowly. "Yes, I remember," Manny said. His tone was firm, yet full of warmth. The beggar's smile flickered for a moment, then quickly faded. His face dropped again, filled with shame. He clutched the cup tighter, hiding it between his knees. "I never thought we would meet again. And especially not like this. Look at you, and look at me." The people around grew silent, straining to hear. The same ones who mocked him earlier were now wide-eyed, trying to make sense of the scene. But Manny didn't show pity. He didn't show disgust. Instead, he leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "It doesn't matter where we meet, brother. What matters is, we're still alive. We're still here." The beggar's eyes welled with tears. He shook his head. "You don't understand. Life has broken me. Everyone sees me as nothing, a useless man, a shame to society." Manny gently touched his shoulder. "No, Kuya, you are not nothing. You are my friend, always have been." The crowd stirred again. Some gasped, others whispered, "He knows him? They were classmates?" For the first time in years, the beggar looked someone straight in the eyes without fear. He whispered, his voice cracking, Do you ever wonder what life would have been like if things were different?" Manny tilted his head. "I don't wonder, Kuya, because I know. Life is not about where you are right now. It's about where your heart is. And yours is still strong." The beggar's lips trembled. He tried to smile, but his face collapsed into sobs. He quickly covered his face with his hands, ashamed to cry in public. Manny let him. He didn't pull him up, didn't hush him. He simply stayed by his side, a quiet reminder that he wasn't alone anymore. After a moment, Manny asked softly, "Kuya, tell me, what happened? How did life bring you here?" The beggar sighed deeply, lowering his hands. His eyes stared, off into the distance, lost in memory. "It's a long story, Manny. A story no one ever cared to hear." Manny nodded, his voice steady. "Then today I will hear it." The marketplace grew even quieter. Phones were still recording, but the air shifted, from ridicule to anticipation. Everyone wanted to know what this man's story was, and why Manny Pacquiao, the people's champion, was kneeling in front of him. And as the beggar began to speak, the crowd realized this was not just a story of poverty. It was a story that would touch every heart listening. The marketplace had grown strangely quiet. The man who was once invisible, mocked, and dismissed was now the center of attention. And yet, he didn't feel proud. His hands shook as he held his cup close to his chest, as if ashamed of the story he was about to tell. Manny sat down beside him on the pavement, ignoring the whispers, ignoring the cameras. He leaned forward slightly and said softly, "Kuya, I'm here. Tell me." The man took a deep breath. His voice cracked as he began. "You remember school, Manny? Those mornings we walked barefoot because slippers were too expensive? The times we shared half a piece of bread between 3 classmates. We used to laugh, even when we were hungry." Manny nodded gently. He remembered all too well. The man's eyes clouded with memory. "After school, I always dreamed of becoming a teacher. I wanted to help children like us, kids who had nothing, kids who just needed someone to believe in them. But my father died when I was 14. Suddenly I was the man of the house. I had to work. I quit school." He paused, swallowing hard. The crowd leaned in closer. "At first I found small jobs, carrying sacks at the port, selling vegetables, in the market, cleaning shoes by the roadside. Every peso I earned I gave to my mother. She was sick, Manny. Always sick. Hospital bills ate up everything. I thought I could handle it. I thought if I just worked harder, life would get better." His voice broke. But it didn't. The beggar closed his eyes, a single tear rolling down his weathered cheek. "My mother died when I was 19, and with her, it felt like all my strength died too. I had no one, no family, no one to guide me. I tried to survive, but every time I stood up, life pushed me back down." Manny listened silently, his eyes glistening. The man's voice grew bitter, but not angry, just tired. "I applied for jobs, but no one wanted. A man without education. Employers laughed, some called me useless. Friends I thought would help disappeared. Slowly, the world turned its back on me. I drifted from one odd job to another, until eventually, I had nothing left." The beggar looked down at his trembling hands. "And so, here I am, begging. Not because I want to, not because I am lazy, but because hunger is louder than pride. Every day I tell myself I will not beg, and every night I find myself here, again. Because if I don't eat." The marketplace was silent. Even the vendors who had once mocked him now avoided eye contact. Some covered their mouths in shame. The beggar added softly, "But Manny, what hurts most is not hunger. It is the way people look at me, the disgust, the insults. As if I am not human anymore, I can take the pain of an empty stomach. But the pain of being invisible, of being treated like dirt, that pain cuts deeper." Manny's jaw tightened. He knew that pain. He remembered nights when he too had gone to sleep hungry. He remembered the sting of being called worthless. But the beggar wasn't finished. His voice lowered, trembling with a mixture of hope and fear. "Sometimes, I dream. I dream of standing in a classroom teaching kids who are like we once were. I dream of being respected again, not for wealth or power, but for who I am. But then I wake up, and reality crushes me. And I wonder, did I waste my life?" Tears slipped down Manny's face. He didn't wipe them away. He wanted his old friend to see that he wasn't crying out of pity. He was crying out of understanding. For a long moment, silence filled the air. The only sound was the distant honking of jeepneys and the quiet sniffles of strangers who now realized they had judged too quickly. But what no one knew was that this man's story still had a truth hidden deep within it, and Manny was about to uncover that truth. The beggar's voice faded into silence. His eyes stared down at the pavement, ashamed of every word he had confessed. The marketplace was still. People shifted uncomfortably, realizing how quickly they had judged him. But Manny wasn't satisfied with only one side of the story. He stood up slowly, his hand still resting on his friend's shoulder. Then, without saying much, he began asking questions. He walked to the fruit vendor nearby. "Kuya," Manny said gently. "This man sits here every day, doesn't he? Tell me, what have you seen?" The vendor hesitated, scratching his head. Yes, he comes every afternoon. At first I thought he was just another beggar, but sometimes I noticed something strange. He doesn't keep all the money for himself. I've seen him buy bread, then disappear into the alleyways. Later I found out he gives it to children in the slums." Manny's eyes softened. He turned to a woman selling roasted corn. "And you ate, have you noticed?" The woman nodded. "Yes, I once followed him. He bought rice with the coins people gave. I thought maybe he would eat it himself, but he shared it with mothers who couldn't feed their kids. He even gave food to an old man who sleeps on the corner. He eats last, if there's anything left." The crowd gasped. Murmurs rippled through the market. The same people who mocked him earlier now exchanged guilty glances. Another shopkeeper added, "He's been here for years, and yet, not once have I seen him drunk, gambling, or causing trouble. Always quiet, always respectful, always giving more than he takes." The beggar lowered his head further, embarrassed. "Please, don't say those things. I don't deserve praise." But Manny crouched beside him again, this time his voice firmer. "No, Kuya. The world deserves to know. You are not what people think. You're not a failure. You've been fighting for others even while struggling yourself. That is the true meaning of strength." The marketplace grew heavy with emotion. People whispered, "Could it be true? All this time, we thought he was worthless. But he was feeding children?" Some covered their mouths in shock. Others looked at the ground, ashamed of the insults they had thrown at him earlier. For the first time that day, the beggar's eyes glistened with something other than sadness. It was the faint spark of dignity returning. Manny stood tall now, his presence commanding. The quiet man in the cap was no longer just another passerby. His voice carried weight, his words sliced through the judgments of the crowd. "This man," Manny declared, "is not invisible. He is not trash. He is my brother, and today, his truth has been revealed." Phones continued to record, but for once no one mocked, no one laughed. Instead, the marketplace fell into silence. The kind of silence that only comes when hearts are stirred and minds are changed. But Manny wasn't done yet. The truth was only the beginning. What he chose to do next would transform this man's life forever. The marketplace was silent. A few minutes ago, people mocked. Now they stood frozen, phones still recording, but their hearts stirred with guilt and awe. Manny straightened his back, finally removing his cap. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The whispers spread like wildfire. "It's him. It's Manny Pacquiao, the people's champ." The beggar looked up, stunned. His eyes widened, his lips parted in disbelief. "Manny, you're not just my old friend. You're the Manny Pacquiao?" Manny smiled softly, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "Yes, Kuya, but today, I am not a senator, not a boxer, not a public figure. Today I am just your classmate, your brother." The beggar's body trembled. His lips quivered as tears spilled down his cheeks. Manny turned to the crowd, his voice steady, powerful, cutting through the thick silence. "For years you passed him by. You judged him. You laughed at him. But you didn't see his truth. This man may look poor in your eyes, but in the eyes of God and in mine, he is richer than many of us. Because even with nothing, he gave what little he had to feed others." The vendors lowered their heads. The teenagers who mocked earlier shuffled their feet, ashamed. The whispers now carried regret, not judgment. Then Manny leaned closer to his old friend. His words were gentle but firm. "You will not beg again. Starting today, you will have work. You will have dignity. You will help children just like you always dreamed." The beggar blinked rapidly as if he didn't understand. Work? Manny? No one will hire me. I'm old, uneducated, worthless. Manny shook his head firmly. No, you are not worthless, you are valuable, and I will prove it. Starting today, you will work with my foundation. We will build programs for hungry children together. You wanted to be a teacher? Now you will teach through your example of sacrifice and strength. The beggar's body collapsed forward, sobbing openly. His hands clutched Manny's as though he was holding on to life itself. The crowd, once cold, now erupted into claps, cheers, even tears. Some shouted, "Mabuhay, Pacman!" Others cried, "Mabuhay ang tunay na bayani!" Even those who mocked earlier stepped forward. One of the teenagers whispered, "I'm sorry, Kuya. I didn't know." Another vendor wiped his eyes and placed a bag of rice into the beggar's lap. The man could hardly breathe through his tears. "Manny, why me? You've already helped so many. Why stop for me?" Manny lifted his face gently, smiling with the humility that defined him. "Because once I was like you, hungry, hopeless, invisible, and someone gave me a chance. Now, it's my turn to give it back." The beggar sobbed harder, covering his face with his hands. But this time it wasn't shame. It was gratitude. It was dignity being restored. The marketplace felt transformed, as if every insult, every judgment, every cruel laugh had been erased by a single act of compassion. But Manny's gift wasn't just money or opportunity. It was something far greater. And it left not only his friend, but the entire crowd forever changed. The marketplace was no longer the same. Just an hour earlier, it was filled with mocking voices, cruel laughter, and cold indifference. Now it was filled with applause, tears, and a newfound respect. People didn't just see a beggar anymore. They saw a man, a fighter, a giver, a human being. Manny helped his old friend to his feet. The man stood shakily, his plastic cup slipping from his grasp. Manny caught it before it hit the ground and placed it aside. "You will never need this again," he said firmly. The beggar wiped his face, still overwhelmed. "Manny, I don't have the words. For years I thought the world had forgotten me. I thought my life had no value. But today you reminded me that I am still someone." Manny smiled softly. "You were always someone, Kuya. The world just forgot to see it. But from today, things change." The crowd erupted into cheers. Some clapped, some cried. A few knelt down to shake the beggar's hand, apologizing for their cruelty. Even the vendor who once scolded him offered food freely, whispering, "Forgive me, brother." The teenagers who had mocked him earlier returned, their faces red with shame. One of them said quietly, "We were wrong. You're not weak. You're stronger than us. Please forgive us." The beggar simply nodded, tears streaming down his face, but this time they were tears of dignity restored. The atmosphere had transformed completely, from judgment to compassion, from shame to hope, from cruelty to kindness. Manny placed an arm around his old friend. "Starting tomorrow, you will work with me. No more begging. Instead, you will help feed children, inspire them, and show them that no matter how hard life gets, kindness survives." The beggar nodded, his voice trembling, but strong. "I will. I promise." For the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible, he didn't feel broken. He felt alive. The crowd chanted Manny's name, but Manny quickly raised his hand, silencing them. "This is not about me," he said firmly. "This is about all of us. Never judge someone by their clothes, their hunger, or their struggles. Behind every tired face is a story you don't know. Respect every person, because today it was my friend. Tomorrow, it could be someone you love." The words struck deep. Many lowered their heads, reflecting on how often they too had judged others without mercy. Manny looked directly into the phones recording him. His voice carried not just to the marketplace, but to everyone who would watch this story later. "Remember this. Wealth is not measured by money. It is measured by kindness, by humility, by respect. If you have those, you are richer than the richest man alive." He smiled gently, guiding his friend away from the street corner where he had been invisible for so long. Together they walked out of the marketplace, not as a champion and a beggar, but as brothers. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Because your story matters too. You never know. Tomorrow's story might just be yours.